Readers, welcome to Book Launches, the best thing to happen to Tuesday since tacos. Tonight, we have Chromium Rise, a Misplaced Adventures novel by William L.J. Galaini. William has been professionally writing for over a decade after many other failed attempts at being a regular person. He now produces narratives for games and writes prose for a living. Curse Dragon Ship signed him on upon being impressed with his showing at a clapping competition where he only missed 1 out of 4 times.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome, and we can't wait to tell you about Chromium Rise. I love it. You know, we should probably have like a different line on that on why we signed you every time I read it.
Oh, really? A different, yeah.
Different one every time. I think that would be amusing. First of all, congratulations on your release of Chromium Rise. How does it feel to have a new book out in the world?
It's been a while. It has been a considerable while. I've had other projects that I'm still working on, but it's like COVID. It's been like 3 years maybe. So no, it feels good. And your pipeline, I mean, not to talk of your pipeline directly next to your husband, but your pipeline was very fluid.
Well, good. I'm so glad you liked it. I have to say, I appreciate all the bad publishers you were with before because it makes me look so good.
Yeah.
I'm just doing the basic what you should do.
Yeah, you showed up.
William's like, wait,
Big
you
step.
do that as a publisher? I'm like, yes. He's like, cool.
Yeah. No, it's great. It really is.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Let's see. You only said sorry 8 times on November 23rd.
I'm not going to say you know what, McSkippy? If I say I'm sorry at all during this whole thing, I'm going to owe you a signed copy.
Ooh.
You keep track. If I say I'm sorry, you get a copy.
All right. McSkippy has a job now. We need an I'm sorry counter.
No. Don't do that, McSkippy. Starting now.
You said I'm sorry. Yeah, that one doesn't count. Sorry. All right. All right. If I'm sorry, Jen said, I thought he was going to say, if I say I'm sorry, then I'm sorry.
Nope.
That's it. It's on now. Now we got to see how many times we can get him to say,
every
I'm
word
sorry.
I say is going to be measured. Must contain my inner Canadian.
Well, I have to say, the awesome part, we are so glad that you are on board with Misplaced Adventures, because the whole point of this was to release books every 2 months so that the audience gets some incredible content. And so far, so good. But everyone also, the whole reason is to have different voices. And your world is wholly unique. So I love the way that you have a completely different world and other creatures coming from it. So I'm wondering, what made you think of Kevin, Petway's original Misplaced Adventures worlds, and you're like, you know what? I think it needs metal monsters.
Well, funny. I would say 3 things. First off, he built a wildly diverse series of biomes on a singular landmass.
For sure.
And it reminded me kind of like India, because you've got these frigid, horrifying mountains to the north, you've got jungles, you've got deserts that are completely crushing. You've got it all in one landmass. The other thing was that my place of strength isn't necessarily fantasy writing. So I felt that out of my lack of confidence, I felt that if I brought in an element that was alien, not necessarily science fiction alien per se, but just otherworldly, characters reacting to an otherworldly presence while trying to solve it through rationale and deal with it through tactics is a bit more my forte. So I leaned into that. And lastly, I wanted to make sure that he'd already established a strong setting, and I wanted to roll something strange into it, but still focus on the setting. So even though I have strangeness coming in from another place, which I won't specify, this story is about how the people of his setting react to it. So I'm still leaning into that a lot. Also, when I saw his map, the star just looked really interesting to me. I really liked how it was laid out. I just finished reading a book called Hero, which is a biography of uh, good, thank you, love, Lawrence Arabia. My wife's like Lawrence Arabia. Thank you. It's not like he's an obscure
This is
figure.
why we need significant others. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just been steeped in a book about desert tactics for like 400 pages, and Vistard just appealed to me.
I love it. I love it. Well, tell us a little bit. So that's why you chose Vistard, which is amazing because everyone got to choose where they wanted to focus their story on.
Right.
And that is a great reason for choosing Vistard. Why did you decide to go with a warlord at the beginning?
Partly because it is a mercenary conglomeration. It's almost a confederacy of different mercenary tribes that would operate there, that had sort of had to be outside of jurisdiction, so they had to go to a terrain that no one else wanted. And it reminded me in Afghanistan how at the higher elevations you have a lot of these subset tribes that are sort of outside of Kabul's ruling elite all throughout history. So I liked that because it meant that all of those relationships between the tribes had to be earned. So whatever diplomacy they had, that peace had to be constantly tended and watered and looked after by the individuals. There was no luxury of latent rulership. So that gave me a good diplomatic terrain to tinker around with. But also I felt that an area like that was a good cultivator for new societies to spring up. So you have all these other kingdoms that are well established, but I really liked the idea of someone looking at this band of misfits, and it sort of feels a little bit like the old United States American dream of, well, what if we made our own country and did it kind of our way? And given that many crimes are committed in that idealistic endeavor, I thought a warlord would be the way to go. And that's why I wrote Everett the way I did. Was I wanted to be an idealist, but also he's very cutthroat, and he's got the level of narcissism required to not question himself into paralysis when dealing with such high stakes.
For sure. I love it. And also, if you are ready to purchase your copy now, because I know you are, Zafo will put the link in so you can get it now. Get your copy, and we would love to hear your reviews. And that still says the wrong book, Zafo, so you know. And yeah, so we'll make sure to put the correct book with the link in there, and then we'll get you covered.
Although I'm sure the book it links to is really good too.
Oh, well, for sure, 100%.
Eat, Love, Pray, or whatever.
I do want to say that the audience has a very serious question for you. First, Florida Kevin said that there's another continent that's entirely spearmint chewing gum. It's just entirely. I mean, why isn't that one on the map? I mean, someone would have chosen that one for sure.
If it was that, what was that 5 whatever gum that apparently punches you in the face? That would have just been too much. It would just been.
Was that juicy fruit?
Oh, I don't remember.
I don't either. I don't remember.
But
I'm not cool enough.
Was it Double Mint? Was that the one with all the twins in the
That was the twin one. Yeah, right. Double. One. Yeah.
Yeah. Double your pleasure.
Oh. That's right. That's right. And that's totally the way they meant it too, even though it was a nice cheery song. Yeah, we knew. But Jen has a serious question. She wants to know if the Chromium could chew gum, what flavor would it be?
Oh. They seem like evil bastards, so clearly it would be sugar-free.
Sugar-free?
Definitely sugar-free.
I love it. Sugar-free.
But if Arvin were to chew gum, it would be that wonderful zebra gum that just got discontinued. He would stock up on it, and he would be snarfing.
The one that tasted vaguely like fruit? Like,
I don't know. I haven't had it since I was 10, so my
little, right? I'm trying to remember.
It's just got a zebra on the gum, and it came in different flavors. I remember, like when I was 10, like, wow, this is amazing. And then I never found it again, and apparently it's now out of business. So I'll have to wait 20 years and get one from a safety deposit box somewhere after someone kicks off at an estate sale.
Well, I'm not sure anyone chews gum for fun anymore. Like, if you are chewing gum, it's like to fix your breath after your coffee in the morning. Like, it's not.
I chew it because it's either that, smoking, or drinking. So it's like, gum.
See, there you go.
It's 10 in the morning.
Very, very orally fixated. I see.
Oh, well, that'll help sales.
Guess what? We'll throw in. I told you it was not safe
Fruit
for work.
Stripe. Thank you. Big Skippy's like, Fruit Stripe, show some respect.
Well, that's the funny thing though. Like the book, however, is very safe for work. Like Arvin is an adult male, extremely intelligent, but he's also really innocent. So I'm wondering why you like decided to throw in like that whole. Well, why did you choose? Tell us a little bit about Arvin and why you chose him to tell your story.
Arvin, okay, so I wanted someone to have to deal with a impending, overwhelming magical threat through logic and comprehension, but also, of course, vulnerability is the key to any good character. So, and it wasn't just going to be emotional or physical vulnerability, but I want it to be emotional vulnerability as well. I like heroes who weren't ever expect to be heroes. Like one of my favorite heroes of all time is Pee Wee Herman from Pee Wee's Big Adventure. So, yeah.
You define hero differently than I do.
Like anti-hero. I mean, there's 5 types of hero. You got your romantic, you've got your mythic, you've got your realistic, etc. I like the anti-hero. I like Riddick. I like Pee Wee Herman. People who shouldn't be heroes but are. And I went with Arvin, and I tried my very best to be respectful in the matter, but I also wanted to write him as though he was on spectrum. But given the setting, and especially given Vistard's nature, they don't exactly have means to deal with individuals who grow up with, severe spectrum issues, etc. So I felt that I wanted to write a story where someone on spectrum can be the hero and save the day. But also Arvin, I felt really sympathetic. I kind of merged a couple of my students together when I used to teach middle school, and Arvin is what came out. So he's just a couple of my students put together who are dangerously brilliant, tragically naive, but ethically ironclad. And that's kind of where I landed with Arvin.
Yeah, well, I love Arvin because watching him explore this world gives you a very different emotion going in. So we have so many different characters because one of your last point of view character that we haven't talked about is the main source. I'm sorry?
Wisteria?
Yes, Wisteria.
Yeah.
So the last main character being Wisteria, and she is the love of the warlord, except she's so much more than that.
Oh.
So having her on there, why did you decide to use her?
She's a little bit of an influence from the Jenny Bezoit, and I hope I didn't rip off entirely from Dune. And honestly, I don't think I did, but you can definitely you can see the influence. But I've always been very interested in polygamy tribes, organizations, and cults that are almost entirely matriarchal. There's been a few of Catholic nuns operating cults in sub-Saharan Africa. In Tibet, there is a large tribe where a woman marries all the brothers in order to keep the population under control. So that way she can't have more than one kid a year instead of one man with many wives, etc. And she will choose whose hut she goes to, etc. So they all kind of have to earn her favor in that regard. But I wanted to approach it from a matriarchal
Are they accepting immigrants?
They're accepting food, actually. Starvation's their big problem. But
that's a clever way to handle that, isn't it? To control the population.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I mean, it's out of necessity, survival, But I wanted to explore a matriarchally run cult, partly because they saw what a male-dominated society did to their civilization, and now this is the reaction to it. And Wisteria is one of their operatives. So I wanted her to have all of that training, all of that mindset. And instead of, she actually meets someone and has because even though Everett is who he is, he's got emotional intelligence and emotional maturity. Mm-hmm. And he's very charming, which you have.
He is. He's so charming.
Yeah, he's disarming and charming. And the whole warlord reputation he makes sure proceeds, but he follows it up with a little elbow nudge and, hey, can I buy you a drink? Mm-hmm. So that personability works very well for him. And I kind of pulled it partly from Alexander the Great for that one. So, and they become healthy lovers. And so I wanted to make sure that she wasn't a wilting, oh, I love him. And he's completely dedicated to her. She's also older than he is. She's got a lot of insight, and he recognizes that and lets that steer some of his decision process. When she's angry at him, he's upset with himself a little bit, and he's just like, oh, how can I win this back? You know, is she still angry with me? She'll get over it. I'm sure she will, but he's still always thinking that she's angry. He's very hyper aware of her approval. Mm-hmm. But with her, in the end, when she needs to, she gives up on the luxury of her indulgence of her feelings and whatnot, and then she'll toggle back to her training of I am an operative. There are things that I can do that most people would balk at, especially with T sets.
Yeah, yeah, there's a whole T set scene, which is awesome. Y'all have to read it. So Jen says they make such a great power couple, and they do, because I love how they love each other.
Yeah, like legit.
But they didn't have to sacrifice their goals, maybe their orders, but not their goals to be a couple. And right. I just think that's beautiful. They blended together and they actually enhanced what they were going for. So that's pretty cool. And then the last people I want to talk about in this book are the 4 characters that we see in the very first chapter that are changed from animals into people. Mm-hmm. So for these 4 people, and we do get to read, see some chapters. So I said last point of view character. I like this is the last one. We get to see some of the world through the badger's eyes, the one that was a badger and then turned into a human. So for these 4 characters, can you tell us which animals they were, sure. and why you liked to choose these 4?
I picked the badger initially. Well, the first one is Bastard. That's his name. He's a badger. He is, and I envisioned.
He earns that name.
I envisioned your traditional, kind of like England Irish badger with a black and white stripe, right out of Fantastic Mr. Fox. Partly because they're adorable and you want to boop their nose, so it provokes a level of affection from me, but also I want to hang on to my fingers.
And they're one of those why not friend if friend shaped, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, I'm gonna pet it. I'm gonna pet it. You're bleeding. I still pet it.
I still want to pet it.
Yeah. So that's why I wanted that. And badgers being just ferocious beasts, but you know, also I feel like, you know, there's that provoked visual affection we have for fuzzy mammal. So I went with him. I also like the burrowing and defensive stance badgers do and how they operate in their set. They're very communal, and I wanted to make sure Bastard was a communal type character who's like, these are my people, or these are my members of my set. No matter how many legs they walk on, they fall underneath my purview of protection. And there's Lovely, who's a swan, and you'll get into a lot of her backstory later. There's back and forth a lot between Goose and Swan. Initially, I kept accidentally writing Goose because I kept thinking of that Untitled Goose Game. But yeah, eventually we steered back to Swan. So it's a little bit more elegant, a little bit more Swan Link, and a little bit less I'm going to fly into your car and attack you while you're driving down the road.
Swans are pretty mean too, so it totally works. Yeah.
So, and that's Lovely. Lovely, we haven't seen as much of her personality bud as I intend. We've seen some of it, but I've got plans for her, especially in the second book. Mama is a black bear. Or did we make her brown bear? I don't remember if we went back and forth on her too. She's a bear.
Back and forth. I don't remember right now. By the way, so for everyone in the audience, this is what happens when you write the book. And Greg's talked about it before too, is that when you are the actual writer and editor, you remember all versions of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got like 8 versions of this with gender flops and everything.
But for sure a bear.
And the funny thing is, like, also once you've written a book and it's a year out, someone like reads you a passage out of nowhere unprompted, and you're like, oh, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, you wrote it. Wait, what? Yeah, that happens a lot. But she's a bear, and I wanted to. I always thought about bears at circuses that were chained up or dogfight bears. A lot of times, the ones that fought the hardest were the ones who just had cubs. And so, if people were betting, and if they saw that their nipples were swollen and they had been nursing within a past week, a lot of people who were betting on the dogs or on the bear would be like, oh, no, change all my bets to the bear, because she's going to eat the 3 pit bulls. And this was common in British society all throughout like 1840s to 1860s. And I wanted
they were so civilized.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Britain. But I wanted to explore that type of mother's lament where she's been separated from her cubs. So she doesn't necessarily have the drive, but she still has the heartbreak. And there's nothing more authoritative on this planet than the supreme mother figure. And like one of my favorite movies is Aliens, and that's just mother versus mother. So I wanted a mom figure to just wreck shit, and that's Mama. Although she's much more tender than I initially thought, but when I initially wrote her, I had her like much more aggressive in mind, but then I wrote her more accurately as a mother. And then lastly, of course, is Rat, who went through a bunch of also iterations and like Stole, Mink, Weasel, and then I was going to be Weasel, and then Suicide Squad came out and they had Weasel in it. Like, this is Weasel, and I'm like, okay, Weasel's out, no Weasel. So yeah, I just went back to Rat, and my sister had pet rats, so I grew up with rats, and they're incredibly intelligent. They'll yoink your homework out from underneath you because they want you to play with them. They would steal my G.I. Joe guns and hoard them because they wanted my attention. They would ride on my shoulder and put their little claw hands on my ear, and their tail would wrap around the back of my neck to balance themselves and go around the house. So they were hooded lab rats. Yeah.
Smart. Yeah, which is why they're terrifying if you see them wild, because they're so smart.
Yeah. Next thing you know, they've lifted your keys and you're driving off with your car.
It wouldn't take long.
So that's how I tried to write Rat. So Rat is, but also Rat he is chaotic, stupid in a way to where like that needle just spins. The first book you're always guessing where he lands. He will figure out where he lands as it progresses.
Yep, I love it. Well, I love because we didn't get a whole bunch of him in this book, but he's going to be featured more in the next one, isn't he?
Right.
Yeah. So I very much look forward to seeing Rat's journey a little bit more. So that actually excites me.
Part of it was that if I kept doing more of his journey, and you very wisely found this, is that it wound up muddling and slowing down the overall narrative arc of the rest of the plot. So it was a bit better to split that arc up.
I love it. We want to put the link up again. First, Al Network and Greg has stopped in since we've been here. So hello, you two.
Hello.
Welcome. And the link, thank you, Zafo. Zafo's got the link up. So make sure to get your copy now. And if you got an early copy, we can't wait to see your reviews, see what you thought of it, share it with everyone else. We know Northern Light shouts it from the roof, and there's a reason why she's like our super, I forgot what's her title, our super fan something on the website. So it's really cool. So thanks for doing that. Owl Light Network says that your brain is fun, William.
I'm glad someone knows it.
It is fun.
I'm trying to glance the comments too.
Yeah, no, you're good. I'll keep you covered as much as I can. I do want to say that because Kimball's on, and Kimball was actually featured as a character in the book. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So because you had two characters that were featured from the Kickstarter that we did.
I've got two featured from the Kickstarter, and both of them are showing up as substantial characters in the next book.
Ooh.
One is one of the matron cultists, and the other is a purveyor of sex toys. Because in a fantasy setting, you have
to bring the fantasy.
Well, the thing is, he winds up sort of helping out with the defense of the city because, I mean, who else is going to have 6 barrels of very strong lubricant? And nothing slows down Chromium advances like them not having purchase.
Al is correct. Your brain is wonderful. It's such a pleasure.
But Kimball makes it into all of my books.
Florida Kevin says dildos are canon, so you're
good. Yeah, they're in. But Kimball gets into all my books because when I first started this endeavor back in like 2013 or 14, I got a very simple, humble gig to try and sell books at Grumpy's bookstore in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And he came in, looked at one of my books, picked it up, and sat in a chair and read it beginning to end in front of me. So at first I'm thinking, Okay. Is he going to buy it? But he finished it and bought it, and he's bought copies for other people. He is. Everyone needs an evangelist, and Kimball is mine. So that's why he shows up in every single book in some iteration, and he can find himself. So a lot of other readers won't see him, but he'll always know which one he is.
Well, Kimball, I don't think you're on our Discord. You should join our Discord. And everyone else out there also, please join our Discord. It's cursedragonship.com/Discord. You can join and you can come on and we can make Kimball a super duper awesome fan too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Kimball's good stuff. He is a voracious reader.
I love it. I love it. Voracious readers are our fans. Are our favorites because, we are too, right? Like that's why we became writers. We didn't see a book and said, I want to be rich and famous. I'm going to write one, right? It was more, we read so much and love it that we were like, oh, I want to contribute too. I have this idea that's running around in my head. If we're rich and famous too, or at least rich, I'm not going to say no. But
I wouldn't handle it well.
Not famous. I wouldn't handle famous well. I could handle rich just fine. Just fine. Not you, William?
I could handle not poor. I could start.
See, that's exactly right. But it seems like there's no in between anymore. You're either poor or you're really rich. There is no in between. So, Florida Kevin says, line from current Misplaced Adventures book. I don't know you. I'm Moreholt. Moreholt. Oh, Florida Kevin. I'm so excited. Sorry.
Of this broken dildo of a tower. Okay. All right. So use a descriptor. Well, so please know.
Actually, a dildo has been used a lot by Moreholt and his sister Raven, and not in the way not in a gross way. I just mean the word, not yeah. So yeah, it's definitely canon.
Well, my purveyor opens his coat up and shows you all of his wonderful options that are dangling.
Literally dangling.
Yep.
There's a reason why you and Kevin get along so well. Allie Briggs' art comes in with big eyes. I know, Allie. You came in at just the right point. Yeah, Jen Bear says, Kevin, you start in with Oldham's random toys, so that was never in question. That's true. It's true. It's part of it. Nice. Yeah, Kimball likes it too. I'm telling you, man. It's part of the magic.
Hey, Allie.
Fits right in. Yes, perfect timing, Allie. So thinking about this book and the great adventures you have going on, and so many things I want to say that I can't talk about. I do want to mention the funny thing is that you had a character named Ovaline, right? And every time, he knows where this is going. Yep. Every time I read Ovaline, I saw Ovaltine. And so I made a note of it, but it didn't bother me so much. And then, of course, we have different editors that go through, right? And so when Florida Kevin went through, Florida Kevin's like, all I see is Ovaltine. And I was like, it's not
you. Oh, yeah. And for me, it's like I'm not attached to a name. So I'm like, I don't care. So long as certain thematics are carried over. Like I wanted Oval as an ovum because all of the women's names of that cult have a V in it, partly because of the shape of the hips, but also I wanted the V to be a through line for all of the starred, Everick, Arvin, etc. Like certain nomenclatures coming through. But in the end, I am not married to any detail like a name. And it's funny because one of my high school friends, or at least someone I knew in high school, I liked him more than he liked me, so obviously it was a one-way friendship. He wound up doing an Ovaltine commercial.
Nuh-uh. How funny.
And so as a kid, he did, and occasionally still, like to this day, late night TV, he'll pop on and he'll be like, Ovaltine, yeah.
You're like, I knew that kid.
Yeah, his name's Josh Hardo. He was in and then I saw him when we went to see Batman The Dark Knight. He's sitting there on screen arguing with Morgan Freeman. I'm like, motherfucker. Ovaltine
not
kid.
You again.
Yeah. Ovaltine kid. So yeah, so we changed the name. No more Ovaltine. But that's good workshopping.
That's
good workshopping. If only Space Force had done that, it would be taken seriously as a military branch. You got to workshop.
Yeah, they definitely should have workshopped that. But
yeah, someone would just been like, "You guys just ripped off the Starfleet emblem. Did you not realize that?" No.
Yeah. Do you know what you're actually doing? Just curious.
Being taken seriously? No, that's not what's happening for you at all.
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. But I'm hoping y'all are appreciating this little glimpse into the creative process. It's kind of the fun part of doing this, right? Like sometimes there's like mystery involved around writers. And the mystery really is we just sit down and work. It's not as fun as anyone thinks it is, right? So I'm wondering, William, what is the biggest challenge you have when sitting down to write a book?
Wording good. I know that sounds like obvious, but the toughest thing for me isn't like writing the emotional scenes or plotting out the characters or what they would do. It's like, I need this character to go from that side of the room to that side of the room and put a thing down, and I need to not to be boring or clumsy or clunky. And I can't do it. It's beyond me. It's just, I can't open doors or close doors. I can crush worlds. I can melt entire civilizations because I have so many more. I have such a larger lexicon for that. But when it comes to, hey, walk across the room, pick up thing, it kills the pacing. It's vital because you have to do it for the sake of staging for the theater of the mind of the reader. And it's just brutally tedious. And by the fourth time you have to do it, it's like, well, shit, now it reads like The Outsiders. What am I doing? So.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I came up with mastering.
Hard part. The hard
That's
part
the hard part.
Yeah, is the sinew between all the good bits.
Yeah, so. Making the story continue.
Yeah.
Kimball says mastering the written word is an amazing skill. Yeah. Yeah. And that is what it is. It's a skill. Or people are like, English, oh, you're so talented. And you're like, you're very sweet. But really, I just had to work until I got it. I wasn't born like that. You know?
I no talent. It's not talent. I do not have talent. I try work. And yeah, exactly. I try and mask my lack of talent with skill to compensate. And it's funny. One of the best people I've heard who gives continuous treatises on talent is Tony Hawk.
Oh, really?
He has done, when he compares different skaters that were underneath his tutorship and purview, and he compares those who had latent skill, or should I say latent abilities, and others who had no latent abilities and just had to work ferociously at it. Tony Hawk really does a very good job of laying out the plateaus that different people hit based upon they skilled enough to this, whereas other people who don't work as hard or need to skill as much lean back on their latent physicality and whatnot. The guy is incredibly sharp. So
yeah,
Tony Hawk really laid out for me a lot of what the comparisons between skill and talent are. And I've learned that I'm not talented. I have to pursue it with skill.
So I say there's still talent in there. Because the creation of the idea, I mean, that's talent.
Anyone can create a good idea. Everyone's got books in them. It's just a matter of having to have people walk across the room and put a cup down on a table without it being boring.
I have a great idea. If you write it for me, we can split it, the profits, right? That is one thing every writer I know has heard over and over again. So as you just said, that's proof right there, right? The idea is the easy part. It's actually writing.
Anyone who says I'm just an idea person is dreaming of the 1950s where men could say that and then just go hit the golf course.
And then other people would do the work for them.
Right.
Yeah,
those days should die, and they are dead.
And they are. Yeah, they're pretty, except way high up, unfortunately. Yeah. We have some awesome questions, though, so the audience is coming through for us. We have Florida Kevin wants to know, what TV network would be your dream choice to make the Chromium series?
Well, not Disney Plus, because then they'll just cancel it and take it off the air for an insurance write-off. Not Paramount Plus, because they'll just sell it to someone else.
Yeah, but they have Star Trek. Come on now.
No, they sell off Star Trek. They took the movies down. TV network. Ooh.
I mean, think of everything we just talked about. There's really only one network that can do it. I would
travel back into time to the late 90s, USA Network.
Ooh.
And I would have it, or the UPN network, and put it between like the Sentinel and Nowhere Man. and Buffy. Yeah, Sentinel, Nowhere Man. But before the Buffy rift happened between them and Angel, where they couldn't reference each other's show.
Well, that's because Angel went to Fox.
Yeah, that's right.
Where Buffy was still on
what
UPN.
happened. Yeah, and they would call each other on the phone and shit. It was like some Three's Company nonsense.
So ridiculous. I'm like, no one's fooled, you two darn networks.
Yeah, no, I would reach back and I'd reach back to USA and make it like, Andromeda, I would need that proper layer of cheese where they have to be creative with the budget.
I don't know. Based on our discussion today, I don't think anything you write, or quite frankly, Kevin Petway writes, it'd have to be on HBO. I mean, HBO is the one with no rules. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, but also HBO. I mean, after Last of Us is fantastic. Chernobyl was amazing. There's a lot of good shows, but
I couldn't watch Chernobyl. It was too painful.
Yeah, but
though I'm having the same trouble with Last of Us. I'm only on the third episode. I put it off because I knew it would be very painful. So I'm watching the third episode, and I was right. It's really painful, and I'm not sure why I'm watching this.
It is a beautiful story about love that does hurt.
It hurts.
Yeah, but I don't know. That's a really good question. Like, every network has done a great show. Every network has done a great show disservice, and every network has done a bad show.
I mean, Ted Lasso was on Apple. You're right. So, it could be about anywhere.
And Apple has Foundation, which is a radical deviation from the book, but still good on its own.
Radical. Yeah. I was like, is this even the same? I'm so confused.
Honestly, sci-fi used to be a laughing stock until Expanse. Expanse was amazing, but they couldn't afford it. So I don't know. We'll see how the Fallout show turns out. Well, if Fallout turns out well, I think the callous humor of Fallout would definitely fit your setting, Kevin. Absolutely.
For sure.
Amazon, because
Jen Bear says it'll have to be pay-per-view.
someday.
The bonus content. Let's see. Nick Skippy says they're taking notes of things to yell at you for saying you have no talent.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jen wants to know, what can you tell us about the cave folk Arvin and the gang come across? Oh, I don't know, man, Jen. I don't know. We can talk about them.
So I won't give too much away, but I pulled a bit from a combination of Bone Tomahawk, and a sort of okay. So it's funny. Both of the things relate almost directly to Kurt Russell. So there's a movie called Bone Tomahawk from the 90s and another movie called Soldier about, one is about troglodytes and the other one is about men raised to be strictly regimented in a combat form. So these guys are raised just to be expendable soldiers. And basically the men we encounter in those caves are of that matriarchal cult. And we'll learn about their role in that society, how they feel in that society. And I pulled a lot from the Army about how some men just want orders to follow. They take
some
pride,
women too, quite frankly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they take pride in a duty and fulfilling that duty, and the indoctrination is easy, especially if that comes from other men. And also, there was a very good article I'd read. I think it was maybe even The Guardian, back in the early 2000s, on how mothers were the predominant radicalization force behind jihadists all throughout Afghanistan and ISIS, where it was the mother who did it. And it was also the mother who castrated their daughters in sub-Saharan Africa when they sliced off their clitorises. So a lot of ways, the matriarchal force, whereas mama can be a loving and powerful, gentle, protective force, in other ways it can be a horrifying, destructive force. There's much good as a good mama does. A bad mother is
can do
horrific.
just as much bad. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
These men are a product of that. And so we'll be seeing a lot more of that from their perspectives.
We'll get more of that in book 2. And if you have no idea what we're talking about, that's okay. You can get your book right now. Get your copy, pull it up, read it, because it's awesome. And it's a quick read, too. I don't mean it's short. I mean, it's quick. Like, it's when you start reading it, you can't stop. So, and that's my favorite kind of writing. So nicely done. There was
someone who's asking me also, I think it was just below that question, about who is your favorite author and what are you reading now?
That's what I was, Karina asked. That was the next one I was going to ask.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I'm not a fan of authors. I'm more of a fan of books.
Sure.
But I do like when my wife at the library, whenever a Ken Follett book comes out, she brings it because even if it's not one of his better ones, I still am always learning something because they're really good examinations of historical events. Like right now, I'm reading um, The Armor of Light. It's a Ken Follett book about the Luddite rebellion in the early 1700s in England, and it's wonderful. But he did Pillars of the Earth and World Without End. He did a really good one about counterfeiting in the 800s in England, about involving the silver sterling silver pieces that wound up collapsing the economy of the Vikings because of a counterfeit operation in the 800s. And he takes these real events and gussies them up with characters and motivations, but individuals, and brings it down to ground level for us to see it. And I greatly enjoy his books because
it's easy to remember that way and understand it. I really love learning history through historical fiction. So when you have people who put the work in, like Follett does, it's worth it because he puts the work in. So when you're reading it, you know the characters are made up, but the human is real. But the human's real in anything I read that's quality, right? But the history is real too, and that part is just so fulfilling. I'm with you on that one.
And there's another one I'm reading, but it's a more difficult read because it's nonfiction. It's a professor from, actually, he's from Virginia, but now in Texas, named Torget, Dr. Torget. And it is a book that details specifically slave law in Texas between 1800 all the way up to Texas becoming a state. And it goes into incredible detail year by year, the back and forth between the Mexican government and the independent Texas government of those legal battles. But there's so many interesting, horrifying nuances. And the fact that Texas's charter, its constitution, is the only one in world history that guarantees and protects slavery is just horrifyingly compelling. But it's a brilliant work. If you are interested in, because he went through all the archives, every law, every single letter involving his book
it's one of those things they don't teach you in school.
Detailed.
You know, it's one of those things you find out later, and you're like, what? Wait,
I'm sorry. I took Texas history in 6th grade, and they never said anything about that. And I am not saying anything about what you have said or what I have said at all.
Oh, so the slavers wrote themselves out of their own history, huh?
Yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah, exactly, Florida, Kevin. Texas is special, but I'm not sure you can talk being in Florida.
Yeah.
But also, with that said,
come on, Florida man.
At no point in the book does he give the impression of necessarily condemnation or I mean, obviously slavery is the prime evil of America's history. But he also is taking a very the motivation behind the cotton industry is that Mexico needed slave labor in order to profit off of these territories. If they didn't have people flying out of America to take them, then they wouldn't have been able to hold on to territory at all. So it goes into, without condemning or condoning, he goes into the motivations behind the different parties involved and how slavery's inevitable collapse occurred.
Yeah, no, it's a lot to take in, but man, that's Karina says that she's shaking her head, giving herself a neck cramp in agreement. And Karina teaches history, so it's in high school. So yeah, I'm sure it's very frustrating what she's allowed to teach and what she isn't. I can't even imagine. Though I have a feeling she's just going to teach it anyways, knowing her. But yeah, it's a frustrating time to be alive, I think.
Yeah, and actually, McSkippy, this book was largely inspired by a footnote. I mean, me reading the book was inspired by a footnote by the book you suggested to me, Forget the Alamo. So you mentioned that to me. I read a footnote in that book, got an idea for a short story, and to research it, I went and called this professor and got his book, and then I'm going to have his friend's book afterwards. So yeah, a lot of this is because of an idea you had. So if you ever wonder where, these stories and such come, where we get the ideas for them, it's because a friend of mine suggested a book that he had heard about somewhere, and we gave it a read.
Yeah. And suddenly I wonder.
And all it was a footnote. And that was oh, and then boom.
Whole idea sparks. It sparks. Yes. So
yeah.
That's all right. Cause your book doesn't have anything to do with slavery. So we're okay there. Not on the outside. I'm looking And he's like, well.
I'm like, well, I mean, there's a cult. There's a literal cult.
It's a cult.
It's
but
unpaid
that's
labor.
Different. That's a different form of mind
labor
control. Yeah.
Backed with violence.
Yeah. Wow, spoilers, McSkippy says. But I love this book. I am so glad that you agreed to sign on. We are so happy to have you as part of this Misplaced adventure that we are on. Hopefully you are also having a good time exploring this new universe.
Oh yeah. It's great. Kevin gave me such freedom with so many wonderful guide rails. And then when I took my vehicle and drove over his guide rails and plowed through all his flower beds, he was gracious enough to contact me and be like, is that what we agreed upon? So I really appreciate, Kevin, you know, because a lot of times I would freak out like, oh God, and you've been great. Thank you.
Yeah, and so all the fans know there is Jen wants to work with something that's also in your world for her next book, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
This should be really exciting. So we're getting to the point where you're going to see a lot more crossover amongst characters and worlds and things going on. So it's getting exciting.
And
so make sure you pick up all of them.
Yeah, having a superior wordsmith visit my material and contribution will be very exciting for me. I'd love to see what Jen does with it.
Yeah, I'm excited too. So that'll be fun. So as your final words, who do you think would love Chromium Rise?
Anyone who enjoys the comfort of the fantasy tropes, but is exhausted by the same fantasy tropes.
Fair. That's great. I love that. And finally, where can people find you and your work?
WilliamLJGalaini.com. You can just Google my last name, Galaini, and find me there.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for coming on board. The link is in the chat if you would like to get your copy. If you are listening to this, it is curseddragonship.com/Chromium Rise, and that will take you right to the book. And we will see you next week with our next book launch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.